Hi, welcome to Bad Music Taste and Other Ways to Ruin Your Life. My name is Dominic.
My name is Sam.
Sam has this week's record.
This week's record is Out of Step by Minor Threat. The copy I have here is a repressing on black vinyl. But anyways, today we're talking to Taylor Morden of Pop Motion Production. How's it going, Taylor?
It's going good. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Great. It's like 6:30 over here. It's very rainy. So,
Yeah.
but a few years ago, you released a documentary called Pick It Up about third wave ska. So, how did you get into ska in the first place?
I got into ska as a musician. I was a trumpet player when I was in elementary school and junior high school, and then I wasn't very good, so I couldn't play in the jazz band or any of that. And I wanted to play punk rock, but I couldn't, like with a trumpet. And then when I first heard ska music, it was like punk rock with trumpets. So I've been playing it ever since.
So,
Yeah, so when you were first getting into ska, who were some of your biggest influences and interests?
Well, it was the 90s, the mid 90s. And I first started listening to ska through my friends who I thought had the coolest cassette tapes. They were listening to all these cool bands I had never heard, but they were only allowed to listen to Christian music. So they could buy their cassettes and CDs at the Christian bookstore. And they listened to a lot of MXPX. And then there was a Christian ska band called Five Iron Frenzy that I was real into. That was like the first band I got into. And then after Five Iron, it was Real Big Fish, Buck-O-Nine, Save Ferris, the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Less Than Jake for sure.
yeah, our very first interview was JR from Less Than Jake, and then right after
Nice.
that it was Mike Park.
Nice.
And before that, I remember I watched that was those were like a year ago, and I was watching like Pick It Up like religiously, studying.
Right on. Yeah, all that stuff happened, I'm assuming, before you guys were born. You don't seem that old to me.
We're both 13.
Yeah.
Nice. So you missed the 90s.
Yeah.
Just barely. But you just made the last Blockbuster, and again, I'm only 13, so I never experienced what seems like the beauty of Blockbuster. So, what about Blockbuster was so special that made you want to make an entire movie?
Well, I wanted to make the movie because here in Bend, Oregon, where I am, we have this Blockbuster video that's the last one in the world. And when I first went there, there were still like 12 left in the world. But even then, I knew it was kind of cool to have one of them here and to have one that I could go to every day because they've been gone. I mean, like you said, you've never been to one, and they've been gone for like a decade for the most part. And they were all gone in 2014. So it was just, for me, growing up, going to the video store was a big deal. I got this sign back here, the video store. Um, but it was like the only way you could find movies or TV shows or anything that wasn't just on TV. You'd have to wait for something to be on TV. And if you had a blank tape, you could record it and watch it over again. But if you wanted to see something else, you had to go to the video store and rent it. And it was such a big part of my life and everybody else's life too, that it's just really weird to think about how that doesn't exist for people your age and, even older than you. There's people in their 20s that have never rented a movie at a video store because things like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon have been around for so long now. Like, why would you go to a place to get a movie when you can get a movie on your phone, right?
Yeah, like the closest thing I've experienced to a Blockbuster was movies at the library.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, I don't even know if they still have movies at the library, but
They do.
okay, yeah. It's been a few years. But yeah, we used to get like movies and like a few books and a movie at the library every week, and that was the closest thing to a Blockbuster in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember doing that too. But as everything's kind of come up, even, where you live being near the last one, have you ever switched to like streaming platforms? Have you kind of alternated between the two or?
Yeah, so I'm not like a weirdo. I stream movies and TV all day long. I just also go to Blockbuster because there is something special about going to a place. Like you must have been to, I don't know what there is still, but like when I was a kid, it was the comic book store or the arcade or something like that. And the video store was one of those places where you would go and you could hang out, on a Friday night. Your parents would drop you off and it was like a safe place to hang out and check out movies and stuff like that. So there is like a vibe to it that's separate from just going to get movies. I'll still watch movies on Netflix and all the streaming services. I don't have cable, I just stream movies, but I will also go down to Blockbuster and rent something. But sometimes I go there and I don't rent anything. I just want to go to the place that reminds me of when I was your age.
Yeah, I mean, having the physical copy of something will always be different no matter what it is. I mean, even reading now, having the ability to just go online and read a book rather than buying it, I think that's also been kind of crazy because I'm a huge reading person myself. But I think just being able to hold something and say like, oh, I'm going to go watch this now. I feel like that's a totally different experience than like pressing play.
Yeah, it's the same for music too. I don't know how you guys get, I saw you were holding up a record, but like music for a long time was an object. It was a cassette and it was a CD and it was a record. And then one day we all woke up and music was just in the cloud or whatever. And it started coming through, hey, Alexa, play Less Than Jake. And it does. And you don't have to do anything. But I still collect records too, because I love when art, whether it's music or movies or books or anything, is an object.
Yeah.
Hold on to, except for now I'm packing to move from one house to another, and then it's annoying having all those objects.
But yeah, like when you have the record, you can like you have the lyrics right in front of you. You can see the people who made the music, who produced it. On Spotify, it's like you get the record cover, and that's why we do record of the week. Just records don't even compare to just listening to it on Spotify. That's why I have these, and then why we do the record every week.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely benefits to both. I mean, as far as accessibility, like you can be like, oh, hey, go listen to this. Like, check this out on YouTube or pull this up on Spotify. So being able to spread things is obviously a lot easier on the internet. But I think being able to physically hold something and like ask a friend to listen to a record with you is also a really neat experience that while we didn't necessarily grow up in that time, we can like look back on it and try to recreate that in a sense.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of try to recognize what that was like.
Yeah, so I'm almost 40, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we didn't really have records then either. It was cassettes and singles and CDs. So for me, it was not something I grew up with, but I still liked vinyl. Even as a teenager, I was like, these are cooler. I'd listen to my dad's records or my mom's records or whatever, and just there was something cool about it. But it's very cool to see like people your age appreciating physical media, because even though you didn't grow up with it, you still get that there's a difference, and that's not everybody is like that. A lot of people just like whatever's convenient.
Yeah, and I mean, now people aren't even like making physical copies of their like albums. It's just like you can hear it on Spotify. So
yeah, so I think for like some up and coming artists, at least, there's definitely been at least some sort of benefit, as I said, as far as getting yourself out there. That's a lot easier to do now, and it's not like, okay, you have to go to record this, you have to get the track and everything. Like, you don't have to prepare things as much. You can kind of just be like, I release music on so-and-so platform, and you can go ahead and stream it. So as far as widening the community with music, I think it's a lot easier, but being able to have that nostalgic experience of like recognizing that is also really cool, as we said.
Yeah, and for like newer bands and newer artists who have like maybe a younger fan base, they can make the argument like what's the point? But for bands like Less Than Jake and bands like that, then you have these fans who like expect the record. Like Anthem,
Right.
they just made that record.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't make that in 2004. That's
No.
yeah.
No one was making vinyl back then. I mean, Less Than Jake did some in the 90s, but there was a while in the late 90s through the early 2000s where no one was making vinyl. And the ones that did are like super rare now and super expensive.
Right.
Yeah, like Pezcore is like there's only picture discs and it's like $50 on Discogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the last Blockbuster recently made NFTs. So what made you guys want to make NFTs?
I mean, I still don't really understand NFTs. Like I said, I'm a physical media. We also made VHS. I understand what VHS is. I understand what DVDs are. But NFTs were all over the news and like on Saturday Night Live, and everybody was talking about NFTs. So my producer was like, we should make NFTs. And I said, well, can we make them look like old trading cards from the 90s? Because I used to collect movies, used to make trading cards like Ninja Turtles and Dick Tracy and Back to the Future. They would have trading cards like baseball cards that you would get at the drugstore or whatever when you're buying a soda pop and a comic book and a pack of trading cards. I sound like I'm 100 years old right now. I understand. But I thought it'd be cool to make some of those. And so we did, and we made the NFTs. And I think a lot of people that like our movie are like me. They don't like digital things. They like physical things. So all the people who saw the NFTs, they were like, why don't you just make the cards, like actual trading cards? So now we're doing that also.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've seen the SNL skits. We've looked into it, but I can't say that I could. Like, I have a basic understanding, but I couldn't tell somebody else what an NFT was. Like, I can't define it, if you will.
It's digital art. I know that much. But you can't buy it with real money. You can only buy it with fake money. And I don't know anybody who has fake money. It gets real complicated real fast.
I think describing it as a real life Monopoly like they did in SNL one. That's just it.
That's good.
But kind of going back to ska, would you say it was a genre you liked the sound of, or one that you could relate to? Because I feel like that's an interesting conversation with music, especially when growing up and you're finding what your taste is and what clicks with you. So.
Yeah. Well, so musically, it always appealed to me, like I said, because it had horns a lot of the time. There were trumpets and saxophones and trombones, and that's, I was in the school band and my friends played trombone and I played trumpet. So it was like, oh, this is cool. This is like what we do. And then I think because I got into it when I was a teenager, and a lot of those bands, those early records are very relatable, I think, for people in their teenage years. Like it's just a little bit of humor, a little bit of like, I got to get out of this town. I hate my parents, that kind of stuff. I related to the lyrics, but I loved the music more. Like, and I told you the first band I got into was a Christian only band, but I didn't go to church. I didn't relate to those lyrics. I just liked the music, so it goes both ways. And then as you get older, you appreciate different bands for different reasons. And some bands it doesn't age as well. Some things I loved when I was your age, I don't necessarily still listen to, but a lot of those ska bands I'll still listen to, especially after making the movie and hanging out with everybody. It's like they're my friends now. So every time I put out a new record, I have to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously in middle school now, about to go into high school, and you think about, like, in elementary school, even songs and albums I used to listen to then, I'm like, I feel like they have, like, a sort of stock life. Like, I can still appreciate them, and look back at the time that I listened to them, but I'm like, why did I listen to that? Like, that's totally not something I would put on now, you know? It just differentiating with what fits for you at that time is always really interesting to look back on, like old playlists and everything.
Yeah, that's going to keep happening for the rest of your life. And the fun part is it'll come back in waves. Like in 15 years, you'll look back at the stuff that is like makes you cringe right now. And you'll be like, oh, but that was kind of good, you know? Or you'll just have nostalgia for it. So it doesn't matter if it's good or not. You know, I listen to a lot of really cheesy music from the 80s and 90s, but it just reminds me of being a kid. It's not necessarily good music. It's just like what was on when I was 10 years old. So.
Yeah, well, finally, another question I had, because of everything Blockbuster, what would you say like a top 5 or 10 movies that like everybody has to see would be?
Oh man, 5 or 10, that's a lot. Well, that's tough because like I usually, when I'm talking about movies, I'm talking to people my age. So
I've seen some classics, I would say.
Yeah, I just watched Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, we watched Pulp Fiction. My mom had me go on a binge of like Pretty in Pink, Dirty Dancing, like those movies for like a weekend straight. So we have some credit, I would say.
Dazed and Confused poster back there.
All right, I didn't know who I was talking to. You guys wise beyond your years. Let's see. Oh man, there's so many great movies. I think all the Back to the Future series is very important for everyone to see. They're great. Jurassic Park, the first one from '94, very important. Most of mine are going to be 90s movies because that's when I grew up going to movies. Clueless, if you haven't seen Clueless, was a great, probably your parents' age people, but that introduced the world to the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and kind of brought ska music into the mainstream a little bit, which is very cool. Fight Club, I don't know if you've seen Fight Club.
I haven't seen it, but I mean, like, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch it sometime. The Matrix, the first one, was the big one. My favorite movie of all time is a movie called That Thing You Do, which you probably haven't ever heard of.
I was gonna say that's the first no on that list.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more obscure. It was a movie that Tom Hanks directed in the 90s, and it's about a band. I think you'd like it if you're into music and you would dig it, but it's made in the 90s. It's about a band in the 60s that was a one-hit wonder band, and then they, kind of go on the ride of being a one-hit wonder band, and then they break up and all this stuff, and it's just like a good comedy movie.
My all-time favorite movie, I would say, is High Fidelity.
That's a great one.
Yeah.
See, I go down more of like a horror route. I'm very much into that. Like, really, like some of the old ones do get a little too cheesy for me. Like, I'll be honest, you have to appreciate the time they were made in. You have to, because I mean, you can't.
Like the first It, like the one with Tim Curry. Right. You can laugh at that now.
Right. Like now looking at the remakes, it's like, oh, okay. But you had to appreciate it for the time it was in. You have to remember, like me trying to watch the first Friday the 13th, I was like lulling through it.
I bet they're going to die.
Right.
But when those came out, I mean, they were so scary and it was so cool. To be a kid when those came out. Now, like the new It is way scarier than the old It. And but you couldn't compare. But then, if you go back further, movies like Jaws, have you seen Jaws?
Yeah.
That one holds up pretty well. It's still, and like the first Jurassic Park, like the dinosaurs are still pretty good.
Yeah.
So some movies are cheesier than others and don't hold up as well.
Yeah, I think they were big for a reason. And then, like, talking about reading earlier on, there's a whole other discussion when it comes into movies based off of books. And you, like, look into that, and that's always a cool comparison to make.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many things off that. I mean, of course, the first one that comes to mind is Harry Potter. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. That was a huge franchise for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, reading the books finally, it's like, that was cool, but they didn't have that. You know, like they didn't have this scene or this scene. And looking at how they were all directed by different people,
Yeah. Like
it's
I'd say
definitely.
I'd say with Harry Potter, most of the time, like the books compared to like the movies are pretty good when it comes to the Harry Potter stuff. But the one thing I will say is Dumbledore did not say it calmly, which once you read the book, he's like in the book it's like Dumbledore said this calmly, and then he screams it at Harry in the third movie.
Right. And so I think the pandemic has had us like appreciate a lot more things. So being able to like compare movies and everything and look at books. That was really interesting to me to go back on that and look at like my mom, obviously she grew up in like the same time. And so she's watching all these horror movies and she's like, this would have scared me and like had me not sleeping for weeks when I was your age. And I was like, you know, so realizing that and having somebody you know so well to say that to you, it's like, really? Like, seriously? You know, I think that's a thing. Like, you know, people say like movies are timeless and they're ageless, but I think the coolest part about them is looking at when they were made and like what was used in that time.
The best movies are the ones that aren't timeless.
Yeah,
it can be fun. It can be fun if there's like very 80s or very 90s, like even Dazed and Confused behind you is very of its time. Like it was a retro movie when it was made, but like now it's retro for two reasons, because of when it was made and because of what it's about. But I also think there is something interesting, you know, about your generation is like it takes more to scare you or to like be exciting or to be interesting because you've grown up, like the internet's been around your whole life.
Right.
Yeah.
And access to YouTube and all of these things that we didn't have, you know, the things in Friday the 13th, the first one, that was like the craziest thing you could possibly see in the world.
It's a crazy discussion to talk about because you realize like it has like a dark meaning under it, you know? You're like everything that everybody else was exposed to, whereas everything just wasn't around then. It's kind of crazy to think about. Like, okay, another really interesting thing that did come from a streaming platform, Stranger Things. I don't know if you've seen it, the TV series. Looking at that is crazy because my mom's like, she said, you didn't have to worry about your kids like going out and just biking around for hours or doing all this stuff. Because I'm like, the parents are so oblivious. And she's like, because they were, you know, she was like, nobody came home until dinner. Everybody was out. And my mom can literally point at like decor around and she'll be like, she said, your grandmother had that in the kitchen and my grandmother had that. And it's so weird. Like that was one of the first shows that was like, it was completely accurate. Because movies, I feel like you can solidify like a setting and a realm, but with TV shows, it's really interesting to see how they'll do that over multiple episodes, you know, multiple time frames.
And I feel like it takes a lot more for younger people to get scared when it comes to horror movies because there's always like now there's always something funny in horror movies like it.
Yeah.
Like there's something like funny about it, like
the lighthearted aspect that's kind of thrown in there to be like, but it's still funny. It's still a good movie, and I think that even more so adds to the shock factor because one minute you have the jokester like making a joke about something and laughing, and then all of a sudden there's like something jumping out, and it adds to like the quick change of it. You know how things can switch up quickly, I guess.
Just like real life.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys. This is really fun. Go watch more movies from the 90s.
Yeah, we will do.
Yeah, I not from the 90s, but I just started Stranger Things.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So
now you have even more reason to continue watching it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Thank you so much.
E.T.?
I'm sorry?
E.T. the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel
Good.
like if you haven't seen E.T., if anybody out here listening hasn't, you have to.
Yeah.
There was Stranger Things before there was Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.